Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Ascension Playground. This is Ursie. I'm still feeling like I'm in the glow of Italia, and I wanted to share a little bit of the richness of why this special place holds such light for me. It's a place I consider home. And though I love California and I've spent most of my life in California, Florence, Italy has a way of anchoring me and making me feel, or I come alive, so to speak, whenever I'm in the town. So, without further ado, let me share with you a little bit of the magic in case you or a friend may not have ever been there. So, Florence, Italy. Yes, it's in the Tuscan region, and this is one of the quintessential images of Florence. It's the domed cathedral that sits right in the center or en centro of the city. This fabulous building includes a tall bell tower. That's the whitish rectangular image to the left, and then the huge orange cupola or the dome of Filippo Brunelleschi. So here's what happened with this story. There used to be a smaller church, which then, when more money came into the city, going from the medieval era of agrarian growers, merchant class arrived. Um, it was really the trading of cloth, of silks, of just fine tapestries, where the guilds or the merchants in Florence started really receiving much more notoriety. So, as their wealth increased with trade, so did their ability to think about, yes, we acknowledge the church, but the working class, merchant class was getting stronger. So it's kind of like what we have today, right? With corporate strength, and then there's government. And back in the day, the church was the government. And so everyone reported to Rome, Roma. But here's Florence, Italy. And I want to go back in a little history lesson in 1296. Imagine that. Look how long ago that was. This beautiful dome started to have its beginnings as far as the church, excuse me, not the dome, but the church started to be built in 1296. And the architect was none other than Arnolfo di Cambio. And what they did back in the day, here I'll go ahead and stop sharing for just a moment. What they did back in the day was typically have a competition. So I love that democratic kind of feeling around let's have a competition and see which architectural drawings we like the best. Now, previous to that, it was the church who would fund and call all the shots. Again, here's this merchant class, the guilds growing stronger with their importing and exporting of textiles and fabrics. So Arnolfo di Cambio started the architecture for this beautiful big church. And it is, yes, Santa Maria del Fiore. But that name of Saint Mary of the Flowers has recently shifted to just basically the Dome of Florence. So what happened is they built a church, but they didn't know how to dome the sacristy part where the sacraments happen. It was just kept open to the elements. So this is what happens when, and you can use this as a metaphor for life, right? When there's a soul, which each of us can do, that answers the call of the collective, right? So there is a huge need. How will we basically shelter the church? That's a metaphor for other things happening in our human collective. When the need goes out and it gets so strong, who will step in to help answer the need? Okay, so this is where you have this idea of here we are moving along on a beautiful trajectory of being human, but then this need creates something almost genius like to answer it. Something similar that comes to mind would be having a human go from Earth to the moon, landing on the moon in our century, right? So it's like, okay, if you can dream it, can you deliver it? But it does take this desire, this call for a greater collective need. So back to Florence, Italy. Okay, Arnolfo di Cambio starts in 1296. But here's another competition. Who will help us dome the cathedral? And so it's like, oh my gosh, everyone couldn't figure it out because the span was so huge and these walls were so tall. And they really didn't have the technology to figure out how to hoist, big supplies. They didn't even have wood that would be long enough or trees tall enough to help span and create scaffolding. So a competition arose. And from it, this short little man named Filippo, who was commonly known as Pippo, Pippo di Brunelleschi. My gosh, he wasn't just an architect, right? He was an artist, a sculptor. He was truly a Renaissance man who's really not spoken of much, except we look at the dome and go, okay, Brunelleschi's dome. But when you pull back and do some research on him, he was very unassuming. What he did try and do, though, was to create this idea of equitable labor. He didn't want anyone to die while working on the dome because he did win the competition. Forgot to mention that. So here you go. You got Filippo winning the competition, but he's such a humanist. He says we've got to be able to work so that we can finish our project by X date within your lifetime, let's hope, which happened for him. And so what he did was he created a way, probably the first labor movement, where he said, going up and down these 600 stairs, the workers are spending too much time to either use the latrine or get food and water, their meals. So he started bringing all the food and water upstairs. He brought bathrooms upstairs, and he created these beautiful machines to help lift material up. But his genius was really around creating a double dome. So we have a dome within a dome, kind of like Russian dolls, right? So my husband Mike and I, we challenged ourselves, weren't sure we could do it, but we did, to ascend within the double domes. There are these passageways. So I was thinking about wonderful Filippo Brunelleschi. Now, before he died, because I think the church was completed, the dome, in 1436. So imagine that it took 140 years to build the fullness of this church with everyone working on it and paid for a lot by, yes, the church, but also the merchants, the Medici. That's where you hear the Medici family. Okay, but what is it that we build today that's going to last? I did the math. 586 years ago is when the church was completed. The Chiesa or the Church of Florence, the dome, everything. Giotto's bell tower. 586 years ago and still going strong. I mean, there's been some minor improvements. They've, of course, kept the exterior and are cleaning the facades all the time. But my goodness, building for centuries. So I thought to myself, what do we build today that will last for the next 500 or 600 years? And this is that window when you study astrology, there's this doorway open now for those who are hearing the call, this idea of, yes, it's super dark, it's getting darker, we're concerned about X, Y, and Z, and here comes the weather, and more stuff is happening. So it's like, okay, the collective need to balance. But while we do this, it's like, what are we building for future? And so back to the astrology, this window of time is open between the Piscean and the Aquarian age, where one of my previous videos talked about, we're now in the age of Pegasus. So this winged horse that can fly up to Olympus, this metaphor of the heavenly realms, but also come to earth, carrying the thunderbolts of Zeus. So for anyone listening, soul to soul, heart to heart, is there something that might come through in a spiritual download for you, that could help build how we move forward as a society for the next 500 or 600 years? just like this magnificent dome of Brunelleschi. I'm going to go and find a few more images for you. So do you see how art history, it's not just about, oh, isn't that beautiful? There is a there's a vision that came through in the architecture that was going to last, made to last. Let's see, here's the dome. Imagine that. Again, did not get completed till 1436. And then before Brunelleschi died, this little top part of the dome that the little round gold ball sits on, there was another competition for who would be at the very top of the dome. And they let Brunelleschi win, even though he was very elderly, and he created that last part or the tip of the dome. Look at beautiful Florence and all that beautiful sienna colored red tops of the roofs, because Italy, how it's run as a socialist society, it makes sure that if you're going to own a home in the town center, you will need to preserve these beautiful tiles. So you can't just start building a contemporary house in the middle of the center of Florence. Look at that. This is an image of we dreamt it, we built it, and it has been preserved for the ages. Here's a picture of the front entry of the church. And so that sacred space between a baptistry, which is on the far left, and the front door of the church, that is the sacred passageway. If you were raised Catholic, you would know you start with baptism, and then you move through the other sacraments, but you move from the baptismal waters into the rest of your life, ending up with your death, of course, in the church. Here she is. Look at that Duomo. So if you ever thought to treat yourself to a fun foreign place to go and you haven't been to Italy, Rome has a beautiful, majestic, very large nature to it, and it is incredible in its own way. Milan is a fashion industry. It's very industrial. It's of the north. And then Sicily, of course, has its ancient antiquities. But for me, there's no place like home than Florence, Italy, which sits in the center in Tuscany. It has pretty moderate temperatures, but everything is changing, of course. The heat is getting hotter, the cold is getting colder, but it is more temperate like in California. So I'm going to pause for a moment and just reflect again on this thought. Can we open up our hearts and our minds and our inner ear to receive messages or inspiration that could help build something? It doesn't have to be an object. It could be building a network, growing a family, growing friendships that will help support the next 500, 600 years as we move into this new age of light. Oh, it just is fun to be back. It's also, I can feel it within my body that I haven't come up to this accelerated pace yet. I'm still like, oh, is it time for a nap? Are we going to go for a passeggiata, which is a walk around? So thank you for listening. I appreciate each of you. And my goodness, we're almost at 501 subscribers. And as a gift, if you're still listening, I would like to consider offering a few more free mini readings when we hit that 501st subscription. So I'll let you know more about that when we hit it. I'll probably take the first 10 people and we'll just go play with looking at your galactic astrology chart, if that's something that you find as fascinating as I do. Okay, my friends, see you next time on the Ascension Playground. Bye for now.